The leaders had agreed that there should be more cooperation on issues such as defence. Mrs. Merkel also told reporters that they had agreed on further action against illegal migration.
Obviously, security, migration, protection of external borders were very prominently discussed on our agenda. We said that we want, if possible, stop illegal migration, at least reduce it very significantly, that we want to tackle the root causes of flight. The EU-Turkey agreement goes a long way towards serving that purpose, but also what we agreed between the EU and Africa in La Valletta. We want to conclude agreements with far more countries than so far and help them to improve the situation on the ground so that people don't need to flee.
Angela Merkel there. Well, my colleague Ros Atkins has spent the day at the summit in Bratislava. He's been watching the day's events. So, Ros, it looks like we have agreement. Talk us through what we have here.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Kasia. I think we were always going to end up at this point. The European Union is desperate to present a unified face to the world and desperate to change the dynamic that's been going on since that Brexit vote. The spat between Luxembourg and Hungary earlier in the week over how Hungary is approaching the migrant crisis didn't help. And I think all the 27 leaders who are here understood this was a moment to strike a unified, more positive note, and they've just about managed that. It's proved easier to do because they never really sought to find any major policy commitments. That wasn't what this summit was about. This is the beginning of a process which leads up to a major EU gathering in Rome in March. This was always going to be about starting something, not finishing it, and as such it's been much more easy for François Hollande, Angela Merkel. I've just come from a press conference with Donald Tusk from the European Council, Jean-Claude Juncker from the European Commission, where they are all striking a very similar note, one of confidence, one of being happy that they've managed to work together, and one of commitment to the processes that they've now begun.
Ros, we know that Donald Tusk is speaking at the moment. Of course, it's obvious that the UK wasn't there. This was a really important summit to show agreement because this was the first one since Brexit.
Right, and lots of our viewers have been getting in touch with me on social media and saying, how did this happen? Is it legal? Why didn't they invite the UK? But actually, this has been an amicable agreement. The UK understands that the 27 remaining members of the European Union have the right to discuss what's going to happen beyond Brexit, and the European Union leaders who have been here, well, they've also been perfectly respectful about the UK, saying, believe it or not, they're not talking about Brexit in detail because until the UK formally says it's off, actually we're in this strange limbo where we know the UK is leading, but the EU and the UK are not yet talking about it. So the expectation was perhaps that Brexit would dominate. That hasn't been the case. The three issues that have dominated are the migrant crisis, security, primarily terrorism, and the EU's economy. Those three have been discussed much more than Brexit.
Yes, we are just getting some more details. Tusk saying that, as Ros, you were saying, the EU well prepared and could start Brexit negotiations tomorrow, but respects UK wishes to delay. So just the latest there. In terms of migration, just bring us up to date. What has been agreed?
Well, to be honest, not much. We have a situation where the EU adopted a plan, a quota system whereby different member states would take on different amounts of migrants. The only problem was, despite this being adopted by the European Union, a number of countries, including the one I'm standing in, Slovakia, have said, we're just not doing it. The Prime Minister of Slovakia has said we will not take one single Muslim migrant. Hungary is having a referendum. The government is campaigning for a rejection of this quota system. And listening to EU officials here, all they've said is they're working hard on finding a solution. They want to talk to Turkey further to see if there are more deals, more areas of cooperation to be found. But if you ask them, is there a completely different plan B to the quota system, which at the moment just isn't working? The short answer is there isn't.
Ros, Thank you, as always, my colleague Ros Atkins, monitoring all those events in Bratislava for us. Thank you very much. We are indeed, of course, monitoring the latest lines, and Donald Tusk now saying that it's very clear that negotiations must be run in interest of the 27 in the EU, not of Britain. So the latest there. Let's move on, though, because for the first time, Donald Trump has personally acknowledged that President Obama was born in the United States. The Republican candidate accused his Democratic Party rival Hillary Clinton of first raising the issue 8 years ago. Well, President Obama said that he hoped that the election campaign would address more serious issues. Mr. Trump first questioned the president's place of birth 5 years ago when Mr. Obama was running for a second term in office. Let's cross over live to Washington. My colleague Anthony Zurcher is there for us. Anthony, this is a complete reversal of what Mr. Trump was saying in the first place. What do you make of all this?
Well, it's a pretty extraordinary moment here in Washington, D.C. this morning. I was down at the Trump Hotel, his brand new hotel in downtown D.C., where he had a campaign event. We filed in there, waited about an hour. It finally started, and then we were all expecting a big announcement. All these rumors of a reversal started yesterday when Donald Trump denied to a newspaper reporter who asked him, denied backing away from his belief that Barack Obama was born somewhere besides the U.S. But then the campaign sent out a press release. Donald Trump said he had a major announcement. He finally took the stage. And then he brought some military advisors out. They spoke for a little while. And then finally, he had his big announcement. Here it is.
Hillary Clinton and her campaign of 2008 started the birther controversy. I finished it. You know what I mean. President Barack Obama was born in the United States, period. Now we all want to get back to making America strong and great again. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you.
So there it is. Donald Trump said that Barack Obama was born on American soil. This was supposed to be a press conference, originally billed as a press conference, where he would take media questions. He didn't. After he finished that line, he got up, he walked out and closed the door behind him with the media shouting questions after him about why he changed his position and what he was going to do now. If he thinks he can put this issue behind him, and it does seem to be hurting him in the polls a bit, particularly with black voters, I think that's going to be difficult. He raised the specter of Hillary Clinton being responsible for this in 2008, which fact checkers have looked into and found that it's just not true. Some of her supporters may have been raising those questions in 2008, but her campaign never did. And Hillary Clinton doesn't seem like she's going to let this drop. Earlier today, she had her own comments about what Mr. Trump has said.
For 5 years, he has led the birther movement to delegitimize our first black president. His campaign was founded on this outrageous lie. There is no erasing it in history. Just yesterday, Trump again refused to say with his own words that the president was born in the United States. Now, Donald's advisors had the temerity to say he's doing the country a service by pushing these lies. No, he isn't. He is feeding into the worst impulses, the bigotry and bias that lurks in our country.
So Hillary Clinton obviously is not willing to let this go. In fact, she tweeted out last night a line calling Donald Trump the birther-in-chief. And her campaign released a statement after Donald Trump came out and said Barack Obama was born on U.S. soil, saying they aren't going to let anyone forget about Donald Trump's role in this and his ongoing, from 2011 all the way up until earlier this year, raising the specter of Barack Obama maybe not being born on U.S. soil. So I think we're going to see this play out in the campaign rolling forward. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a key exchange between the two candidates when they face off in a debate later this month.
Anthony, of course, President Obama was his usual relaxed self about this, saying that he was pretty confident where he was born. But you've already mentioned that this is damaging Donald Trump in the polls.
It is. It is. It's hurting him not only among black voters, but also among the moderate swing voters in places like Pennsylvania and the Philadelphia suburbs who are traditionally Republican. They look at Donald Trump embracing what is pretty clearly a fringe conspiracy theory, and that puts him outside the political mainstream in this country. The irony also is that even if Barack Obama was born in Kenya, as some people allege, he would still be qualified to be U.S. president. All it takes is being a natural-born citizen, and that requires one parent being a U.S. citizen. Barack Obama's mom was born in Kansas. She was an American citizen. He is a U.S. citizen.
Remarkable that we are still speaking about this. Anthony Zurcher, as always, thank you very much, my colleague there in Washington. Now, let's bring you up to date with lots more news. Russia has said that it is ready to extend the Syria ceasefire, set to run out on Friday evening for another 72 hours. That's despite accusing the US and rebels of not fulfilling the deal. Numerous ceasefire breaches by both sides have been reported, with UN aid workers saying that they are still unable to secure safe passage to deliver aid to Aleppo. A suicide bomber has attacked a mosque in northwest Pakistan, killing at least 23 people and wounding dozens of others. According to local officials, the bomber struck during Friday prayers in the village of Butmana in Mohmand district bordering Afghanistan. July and August were the joint hottest months ever recorded across the planet. That's according to the UN Weather Agency. 2016 is on course to be the hottest year since temperatures were first recorded in the 19th century. The World Meteorological Organization described it as the planet sending out distress signals. A judge in London has ruled that an autistic man accused of hacking into government computers in the United States can be extradited to stand trial in the US. Laurie Love is accused of breaking into the computer systems of various agencies, including the US Federal Reserve, the Army and NASA. Mr. Love has previously said he fears dying in a US prison. The US government has agreed to pay the family of an Italian aid worker accidentally killed in a US drone strike in Pakistan. Giovanni Loporto and an American aid worker, Warren Weinstein, were being held hostage by al-Qaeda when they died in a US counter-terrorism operation on the Pakistan-Afghan border last year. Well, the White House has confirmed that payments have been made to both families, but they haven't released the exact details. But The Guardian's Stephanie Kirsch-Geisner has seen the documents and actually broke this news on the settlement together with the Italian newspaper La Repubblica. She joins us from Rome. Stephanie, thank you very much for speaking to us. So the US haven't outlined the details, but you've seen the initial reports. Just bring us up to date. What are the details?
Well, so as La Repubblica obtained the documents of this really extraordinary payment that was made by the U.S. government, just to be clear, the reason this is such an important moment, it's because it's the first time that the U.S. government has made a documented payment to a victim of the family of a victim of a drone strike that was killed outside a declared war zone. In this case, it was Pakistan. The document is a pretty standard legal document. What we can gather from looking at it is that a representative of the U.S. Embassy here in Rome met with some other officials and agreed to make a payment of 1.2 million euros to the parents of Giovanni Loporto. And there was no acceptance of responsibility or apology in this document. But it said that it was made as a donation in the memory of Giovanni.
They described the money as a condolence payment, adding that no figure would bring back the families of loved ones. I know that you have been in conversation previously with the brother of Giovanni. Have you had a chance to talk to the family at all?
Well, it's really an extraordinary development also because when I initially spoke to Daniele Loporto, Giovanni's brother, earlier this year, it became clear that the family really felt abandoned, both by the U.S. government and by the Italian government, even though President Obama himself did accept responsibility for the accidental killing of both aid workers. They had never heard from the U.S. government again. In fact, they had quite a bit of trouble transferring Loporto's body from Rome to his home in Palermo, Sicily. So we've gone from that to suddenly this extraordinary payment of 1.2 million euros. Like I said, I did have an email conversation or chat with his mother, who was really just talking about her grief at the loss of her son and didn't discuss the payment at all. And his brother did confirm the payment.
Okay, well, Stephanie, as always, thank you very much for filling us in on the details. The Guardian's Stephanie Kirsch-Geisner speaking to us live from Rome. The United Nations is still waiting to deliver aid to the besieged Syrian city of Aleppo 4 days after a ceasefire came into effect. At least 250,000 people are in desperate need of food and medicine, but the UN says that the Syrian government has failed to provide permits to trucks into rebel-held East Aleppo. The BBC's Middle East editor Jeremy Bowen filed this report from a university campus in government-controlled Western Aleppo.
This is the campus of Aleppo University, and since 2012 it's been used as a shelter for displaced people. I'm told that around 20,000 people, it's a floating population, live here. Could be worse. They can go out, they can work, they can come and go as they please. It's very different to the situation in East Aleppo, where they just don't get the supplies in the way that places like this are supplied. This was student accommodation. The rooms that used to hold, I suppose, a single student, maybe two, now hold one family, maybe two. It's overcrowded, but I can see the people who live here are keeping it as clean as they can. The humanitarian side of things is a big component to the ceasefire agreement. It was how they got a lot of the rebel groups who didn't like the agreement because they felt it let the Assad regime off the hook. It's the way they got them involved in it. The idea is that humanitarian aid will flow into areas that the government have deliberately besieged and cut off from food supplies. Now, so far, that has not happened. By now, the hope was that convoys of relief aid would be moving along this highway. It's called the Castello Road, and it runs into the northwestern sector of Aleppo. The UN has blamed the Syrian government for not giving the relevant permissions to let the lorries in. Now, if the humanitarian part of the ceasefire doesn't work, the rest of it probably won't stand either. The longer this road stays empty, the more likely it is that the ceasefire will collapse.
Jeremy Bowen reporting. The Italian Prime Minister says that the state cannot intervene to prevent people posting intimate or salacious material online. Matteo Renzi was speaking in response to the suicide of a woman who fought for months to have her sex video removed from the internet after being mocked and abused online. Well, 4 people are being investigated, as Katrina Renton now reports.
Tiziana wanted to be forgotten. Now she's remembered across Italy. Her funeral procession was broadcast live on television. She was 31 years old. She killed herself on Tuesday, leaving her family heartbroken. 1 million people viewed an explicit video of her on the internet. She sent it to her ex-boyfriend and 3 others. They put it online. After it went viral, she left her job, moved home, and was in the process of changing her name, but the story kept following her. In court, she won the right to be forgotten. Websites and search engines, including Facebook, were ordered to remove the film. 4 men are now being investigated for defamation. Campaigners say this is a global problem, and people who post these types of image and those who share and copy them have to be tackled with criminal law.
There are no boundaries or borders to the internet. What happens to us online certainly affects us offline, and that can be no more clear than with revenge porn. Really, we need to change public perception here. It's not funny, it's life-ruining for people. But we certainly need criminal laws that will prohibit the dissemination of someone else's private sexual images that they had an expectation of some sort of privacy in around the world and around the globe.
International model Leomi Anderson spoke out earlier this year. She experienced pressure from boys to take intimate pictures of herself. She now campaigns to warn other young women of the dangers of sending personal images on mobile phones.
Sending these pictures to your partner or whoever, I think that they feel like it's shows that their relationship's more grown than it actually is, and then they're devastated when they receive the backlash if it gets leaked or exposed.
There has been an outpouring of support for Tiziana on social media, the very thing that destroyed her life. Tiziana's family have called for the justice system in Italy to act so that her death is not in vain. Katrina Renton, BBC News.
At the Paralympic Games, the athletes' impairments may reflect disease, lack of prenatal care and high rates of car accidents. But they also mirror the harsh reality of armed conflict around the world. Soldiers wounded in wars, civilians injured by landmines, and now refugees are part of the Paralympics and testament to the power of sport. Julia Carneiro reports from Rio.
Arms open to Rio and picture time for the U.S. Paralympic football squad. A first day off after the seven-a-side competition at the Games. 4 members of the team come from the U.S. military. 3 suffered traumatic brain injuries at wars overseas. Co-captain Seth Yan was injured in Afghanistan. 29-year-old Joshua Brunet dedicated a third of his life to the army, until a helicopter crash and IED explosions in Afghanistan took him out of action for good.
There was no returning to work, so I had difficulty trying to figure out what I wanted to do after that. And then I found this team, and I found a new purpose in life, and I get to play soccer every day. It's the best sport, and I get to meet all these great people, and I feel really at home with these guys.
The U.S. is one of several teams in Rio with athletes who were wounded in the battlefield. The Paralympic movement has its roots in war. Veterans from World War II competed in Stoke Mandeville in England in 1948, the birthplace of the Games. The link to war is remembered in this International Red Cross exhibition to provoke thought amid revelry here at the Swiss Hospitality House. These pictures reflect the lasting impact of conflicts around the world and the power of sport to help overcome the traumas and injuries of war.
These athletes here have had a difficult journey.
This is the Paralympics response to the world's most recent crisis, the first ever refugee team. Syrian swimmer Ibrahim Al-Hussein had his leg blown off in 2012 and faced the risky crossing to Greece. He says 2016 has been the best year of his life.
Our presence at the Paralympic Games is very, very important. It brings awareness to the refugee crisis and shows that sport can help put an end to the bloodshed. I hope that in 4 years, each athlete can compete under his own flag.
Tony Sainsbury was moved when I asked about his new role leading the refugee team.
I was the chef de mission of the British team. I was very proud to do that. Well, this is on a different scale.
As these athletes prepare to leave Rio, it's with a renewed sense of ambition.
We don't just get put on the couch and have to do some job we're not happy with. We can find, another direction and make ourselves and our families proud around us, give us a high goal that we can achieve. So.
Violence has changed the course of their lives, but sport is helping them move forward. Julia Carneiro, BBC News, Rio de Janeiro.
Before we go, let's return to the presidential campaign trail in the United States. Until his political views started to raise a few eyebrows, it could be argued that Donald Trump was as famous for his hairstyle as his business success. Well, on Thursday, Mr. Trump appeared for a taping of The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon.
Can I mess your hair up? I'll be gentle.
The answer is yes, but the people in New Hampshire, where I'm going to be in about an hour from now, I hope they're going to understand. Okay?
You say yes?
Go ahead with my hairspray.